Hey everyone, Tactics here with some more plus 20 dungeon walkthroughs, this time with Necrotic Wake. Just like with my other commentary videos, in this I'll be highlighting routes similar to the one in my advanced routing series, discussing the pulls as they happen and what we do to deal with them, as well as some possible changes you can make depending on what the affixes are or what your group comp is. It is also going to be showing off the dungeon on Tyrannical Week, and Necrotic Wake is actually a dungeon that we found we do pull slightly differently on Fortified versus Tyrannical weeks, especially after the nerfs to weapons in the dungeon this season. Because of that, this route is going to be slightly different than the advanced route I showed in my other video, as on Tyrannical week we now need to commit more weapons to certain bosses, which leaves less room for one of the major pulls that you would do on Fortified that's a little bit more dangerous, which I'll discuss later on in this video. I'll also post the Wago link to the MDT route for this if you want it for yourself. With all that said, remember, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it, and let's hop right in. So off the pull here, we do a pretty large pull. This is the same as the Fortified intro pull. The only difference here is that on Tyrannical week we do not commit Lust to this pull because it's fairly fine with everyone just popping cooldowns without committing Bloodlust, and you really want Bloodlust for that first boss because it is the probably biggest time save to lust that first boss on Tyrannical, just because he is really thick. So here you just want to focus on those Harvester interrupts and just kind of AoE it all down. Keep in mind the Blight Bags don't do on death affixes, so it's bursting this week. We're not worried about them giving you a ton of bursting stacks or anything like that. You're free to just cleave them down. Right after this, you'll see we're actually going to LOS and then pull the Lieutenant alone. Any class with a 40-yard range is able to do this. I just do it myself while the rest of the party LOSs. This is either Varuth, as it is in this video, or Arcolith, and if you do this Arcolith casting, you'll just LOS it. Don't need to worry about having to run out and interrupt or anything like that. You can just wait until he comes around the corner. In terms of weapons, what we do here is we always have the tank and the healer take a hammer, and that's for the last boss, which I'll explain when we get to it. So I end up taking this hammer in a bit here. And we have the spears because a lot of the pulls that we use a spear for value having that misdirected to the tank. Instead of having me do it, we just have the rogue use spears and misdirect, and you'll see he'll actually backtrack later on in the dungeon to grab a spear for the final spear. But here we're just getting our power. I'm going to go grab my hammer. I think the rogue has already grabbed this spear, and they're going to actually shroud through to the Kyrian Golem. Now this is also slightly different timing for Fortified and Tyrannical. So what's going to happen here is on Tyrannical week, we're going to wait to open the Golem until before we pull the boss, because we are doing one pull beforehand. It's going to be those two soldiers, these padding Blight Bags, and then those three soldiers right in front as well. We don't want to get that Gatekeeper, that's why I waited a touch there before actually pulling the pack, so just be aware that that Gatekeeper is a bad news. But on Fortified weeks, we would actually grab these Kyrian Golems, the Kyrian Ball from the Golems here, before this pull. We're not doing that on Tyrannical week because, again, we want the full duration on this boss with Bloodlust, with all CDs, so that we can burn that boss down ASAP. It's less of a big deal on Fortified weeks. This pack is kind of scary, honestly. On Fortified weeks, all the soldiers deal a decent amount of tank damage, and they all jump around, of course, so that's why we would delay or not delay this Golem depending on the week. But like I said, we're right into the boss here. Lust, all CDs, and we're actually going to be baiting this first wretch towards this pack in the middle here. And the goal here is pretty much to kind of do a U shape. So with the slime on the ground, we're going to try and kill those worms as on top of each other as possible, kind of take up as little room as we can, and then slowly kind of make a U shape with the puddles. And this can get pretty tough, especially for a double melee party like we are. So you'll see, I mean, I'm helping out a decent amount, the Disc Priest is helping out, and of course the Ellie Shaman is, and we really make use of our knockbacks and our stuns on these worms. See here, there's the AoE stun, and then we'll knock back after, just to make sure no one is eating those worm bites, because on Tyrannical, especially high Tyrannical, those worm bites really chunk, so you want to avoid those as much as possible. So really just good uses of knockbacks, good uses of stuns, and anytime a melee DPS isn't fixated by one of the worms, they can also help out a decent amount. But that's a little bit RNG, not something you really want to rely on. So we're able to do it though with just the one range DPS and some help from the tank / healer. But overall, it can get a little bit scary. Now there is going to be 2 blight bags, I believe, just behind me. We do pull those in, both fortified and tyrannical. We just kind of cleave them down with the boss. Again, blight bags don't really interact much with affixes, so they're not too big a deal to add to bosses. Really, they're not going to add too much difficulty to anything. They also have pretty low HP, so they're not too big a deal. At this point, we're just focusing the boss, ignoring the worms, and it's pretty low health. And this is where one of the big differences between the tyrannical and fortified routes happen, is that on tyrannical we actually backtrack. Like I mentioned, we use more weapons on bosses on tyrannical, and basically that ends up meaning that you don't have a spare orb. Now, for fortified weeks, you can use an orb and do a Nar'zuda pull, which I'll show later on us skipping the Nar'zuda pull, but that's in the advanced routing video. We do the Nar'zuda pull with the orb, and that's not something you have on tyrannical, because even on tyrannical, I mean, Nar'zuda is a mini boss, he's pretty healthy, and that's something you would still want to commit an orb to even on tyrannical weeks. And so since you don't have that orb available to you because you need it for the second and the third boss, that's just not something you can do, right? So I mean, it's definitely doable still, but it just gets very, very scary, and this is just so much safer. It splits it into 2 different pulls because this doesn't quite make up the percent that you need. You need to do another pull later on, which will also note, but it's what you kind of have to do on tyrannical weeks to make up for the fact that you're committing so many weapons rather to the bosses as opposed to using it for faster trash speeds. So because of that, we're just going to have to do 2 pulls instead. But on fortified weeks, that's why another reason why this dungeon is much faster on fortified weeks. Aside from the boss timing difference, it's that you're able to do 2 pretty crazy pulls percentage wise and only commit a single weapon to them, and it just gives you a whole lot more time in this dungeon. And even on tyrannical with this route, the dungeon is pretty forgiving timer wise, so it's not the end of the world, but just on fortified you're able to save so much time by doing pulls that you otherwise can't on tyrannical week because of the lack of weapons. So from here, we're just insta activating this Kyrian Golem and doing a triple pull into chaining it directly into a 3-pack here. This could be difficult if you don't have 2 Kyrians. You have like 20 to 30 seconds leeway on your first Kyrian, so it's tough on tyrannical weeks because of the long boss fight. On fortified weeks, it's definitely much easier to fit in that time frame, but we have 2 Kyrians, so it's not the end of the world for us. But it can be a little rough if you only have a single one. As you can see, we're CCing that mage. We don't want to deal with their kicks at all. There's plenty of other kicks in this pack with the necrotic bolts and whatnot, so just any kind of CC, blind. We have shackle as well, you'll see in another pack. And then we're chaining this because we do have the Kyrian orbs active. We have some like Storm Ellie is still going, so we're just chaining this into the next 3-pack. Getting more value out of those Kyrian orbs, and make sure Marauders, they need to get focused when they have that shield up. Damage of the Marauders really doesn't matter until they have that shield, but once they have that shield needs to get broken, because then of course as you see they just insta die pretty much once that shield is broken. So really focus on that, helps tank damage a lot. So this is just walking by the Nar'zuda pull. You would drag these 2 guys onto Nar'zuda, but instead we just Mind Soothe pass. And we're going to Shroud pass. We're just having the Shaman pick up the hammer and the spear. So Shaman will use hammer because he is our lowest single target DPS in this given group. And so that's what we're going to need for the last boss again, because last boss gets all 3 hammers. See there, I accidentally broke that mage out of the CC. Boomkin affinity, swipe range, very large. So that's on me, but normally that would be CC'd out to the side here. Now, one thing that we could have done differently here, you see that mini boss padding forward. We should have called for a distract. I called for it and then I told him not to do it because I thought the timing would work out fine. But if he had distracted, we're going to lose 15 seconds of these Kyrian orbs here because we're kind of stuck, right? We don't have Shroud. Shooting that gap is very risky because you don't want to pull those 2. And so we end up just having to wait for him to finish the pat. Probably should have just let him distract. And then we would have been able to pull Sagadon back and then let him continue padding. But it's not the end of the world. It's a much bigger deal on fortified week because you really want these Kyrian orb duration for the next pull we're doing. But as you can see here, like this guy is just melting because of the Kyrian orbs. Really, really big damage. But we're going straight from Sagadon, getting our powers quickly and running into the next pack here. But again, as you see, we would have had 15 more seconds on the Kyrian Orb, so that would have lasted, I mean, pretty much all of this pack as well. Again, it's not too crazy. We're getting Necrotic Bolt Kicks, and we're just focusing the Marauder. When he actually gets into his Bone Shield there, he'll just die. And then we'll just keep moving here. The third final hammer, like I mentioned, this is going to be the Healer Hammer. And then we have the Spear over here. That's going to be the Backtrack Spear. So the Rogue already has a Spear. He's going to use a Spear on the second boss here. And then after we're done the second boss, he's going to stealth back, pick up the Spear again, and then come up top with us. Obviously, if you don't have a Rogue, it can be hard to backtrack the Spear. You can just throw it on another one of your DPSers, or maybe your tank, depending. But it's not the end of the world if you can't backtrack for it. It's just we found it easier for the Rogue to throw 2 of the Spears, especially even on Tyrannical Week. On Tyrannical Week, you could get away with just 1, honestly. You could even get away with a tank throwing the next Spear that on the second boss. But on Fortified Weeks, because Spears are getting committed to fairly large trash packs, like I showed in the advanced routing video, and so that's something you would really want misdirected, and that's why we would normally have the Rogue. So we do this on Fortified Weeks anyways. We just kind of stick to it for Tyrannical Weeks, even though it's less necessary. As you can see here, double CC on the mages. Don't want to fight them at all. We don't care. Necromancer is the only thing that matters. When it dies, everything else dies. What we could have done here is you can actually send someone up these stairs a little bit early, and it'll trigger the RP for the boss. We just forgot about it, but that'll save you like 10 seconds. They can run up here, get stunned, and then run back and help with the pack, and that'll have basically the boss will be active by the time you're done with that pack, and you don't have to sit here waiting for like 10 seconds. But we are going to pull the Incinerator in with the boss. So we're spearing, so the Rogue is over to the side. He's lined up the Spear, just waiting for Amarth to be active. Spear goes out, we clip them both. I also commit the Orb here, and the Orb will just chain silence both the boss and Archelaus, so we don't have to worry about any kicks on them. They're getting chain silence. I even walk on top of the mage here, and Archelaus is already dead. And that makes this lieutenant very, very easy to deal with, whether that's Archelaus, whether that's Varuth, because those two are tied together. Super, super easy to deal with. We're lusting here as well with all CDs, so that's why everything's getting chunked. And we're just going through Amarth. Now, Amarth also, very, very spooky boss the later this gets, right? It's something that you definitely want to be ready to use defensives for, use your personals for, and you can see it's going to get a little spooky for us later on, but overall, it's not too bad. You just need to really watch CC. Like, we have a really weird, like, the chain lightning's been acting super weird. So, like, he did it off the boss, but it chained out to the CC ads. I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to do that. We also found that chain lightning was doing weird things, like cleaving off of mobs you're engaged in combat with onto yellow mobs, specifically in Plaguefall, all over the place. It's super weird behavior, and I don't think it's supposed to be doing that. Anyway, sorry. So when these guys are near, if you see that the ad wasn't quite dead yet, you can hard CC them like a stun, any kind of CC like that, and it won't actually murder your party like just happened. I'm pretty sure we didn't quite kill it in time, but we stunned it, so it was fine. The Rogue just had to eat his cheat death by standing in a swirly, but that is okay. We're not all dead. From here, though, we're just finishing off the boss. We're just cleaving down this last warrior, just making sure they're either dead, because we don't really have too much in terms of stuns. We had a stun left for that one, so we didn't quite need a tunnelet, but it's okay. But grabbing power here, don't forget. Also, don't forget the Orb. Rogue is backtracking, as you can see in the minimap. He's grabbing that third spear. I grab this second Orb, and then we go up top to the Necropolis. Now, the Necropolis, it can get a little bit scary in here for sure, because you pull fairly aggressively. Even on Fortified Weeks, it's very aggressively. I would recommend these spare parts first, especially if that lieutenant here is Soggodon. If that lieutenant is Soggodon, because these guys have like the weird targeting, never pull Soggodon with the spare parts. They are going to absolutely murder your party. We've done it once. I don't recommend it. I am going to pull Oros here though, and I believe I'm just convoking and then pulling the 2-pack right here, and that gives us the opportunity to cleaver Oros down a fair bit, which is really nice. It's just a bunch of free damage in this area. And even on tyrannical weeks, those flesh crafters chunk with those axes. It's a lot of damage. So anytime you can take advantage of that, you're saving yourself a bunch of time. Moving through this pack, we are lining up a double pull. Now, what the fortified double pull is these two packs right there. And we throw a spear that cleaves both Stitchworks. And then we pop all CDs. I think it's actually doable without a weapon on fortified weeks, especially as a Guardian Druid with Incarn up. We didn't do it in this, but based on how the double pull we do goes, I think we could have done it. Because we have pretty good burst AoE as well. But as you see here, we're instead of doing that with the double stitch work, we're going to pull in the left corner here. The pack is also over there already. I'm just marking collectors for kicks. Kicks, super important in this pack. If the gore splatter goes off, you're pretty dead, even on tyrannical weeks. Fortified weeks, you're just for sure dead. It hurts a lot, especially on high key levels. So just try and assign 2 kicks to each of those, and just try and burst them down if you have a couple range kicks. You see, we have 4 melee kicks, right, with the shaman, 2 melee DPS, and the tank. But if you're someone like a double or triple ranged group composition, that could be a little bit rough for you. So you would probably want to focus down those collectors, but that might be a little scary for your tank if you're not focusing that stitch work, right? We were funneling into that stitch work there, and he still lived pretty long, right? So it's a little scary for sure. I think doing the double stitch work without a weapon on tyrannical might have been possible, but it's for sure doable. On fortified week, we commit a spear though, so that's something we don't quite have, because again, we speared the second boss, we're going to spear the third boss, and we're going to spear the fourth boss, so there's just no more spears left to use on faster trash pulls. Just a bunch of chain pulling here, just pulling this room basically as quickly as possible, keeping kicks on the collector. Not much else to talk about here. For Stitchwork, specifically on fortified weeks, it's not too much of a problem here. I think I'll elite like 4 stacks of the armor shred. But on fortified weeks, that might be a little spooky for you. And what we can do and what we do occasionally is we do have the warrior kind of just taunt die by the sword, and he'll eat a tenderize stack, and I'll just taunt it back, and that'll drop my stacks. So that works. Any DPS that can taunt can do that. You can like jump away and taunt and then kite for a little bit while the stacks drop. That all works as well, but that's more of a thing on fortified. It's not too big a deal on tyrannical. As you can see, I'm at 4 stacks. It's not the end of the world. I probably could have taken a 5th, but any more than that, it would have been a little spooky. In terms of CDs at this point, this is probably the last spot. 3 minutes could pop and still be up for when you want it on the boss fight. So you see here we have the Storm Melody. Storm Melody is a little shorter than 3 minutes, so it'll be up regardless. But 3 minutes is like, this is the last spot you can pop it and still be on time for your second boss burst here. We are going to be spearing the boss, like I said, so you want your burst in that if you can. I'm going to pop my Incarn on the next pack you're going to see, because I don't need Incarn for burst. I'd rather have Incarn for, defensive purposes and for if there's ever a double stitch work up. So that's what I'm going to have Incarn up for, and it'll be up if I use it on this pack for the double stitch work. So that's perfectly fine, but if you are something like a Boomkin, you need to send your 3 minute on the 2 pack just before this, the 2 mini bosses. Otherwise, it's just not going to be up when you need it. Not too much on these guys, honestly. Got Slice, the other guys got the Puddles. We can fast forward a little bit to the boss. Just pulling them as we get them. Here we go. And then we're going straight into the boss here. Now, surprisingly, and this is the first time it's ever happened, we actually kill this guy early on Tyrannical Week, which is, it's never actually happened before, so surprise. But normally we just kind of pump this guy. 85 is where you would want to stop on this creation. But we aim that first hook. We have the rogue send the spear here, and then I send the second orb as well, and we just pop all CDs, no bloodlust, and we pump the Stitchflesh, or Surgeon Stitchflesh rather, and the meat hook at him. But as you can see here, that stitch work is scary low, very, very low, and we're barely going to miss the second hook, or the third hook rather. Pretty unfortunate. That would aim right back at the platform. You see, if that went off, it would have pulled him right back down, and we would have been able to 2-phase. We still had like 7 seconds of Storm Ellie ramped up, but it's unfortunate. I think you're going to see we're going to have to 3-phase here now because we lost a bunch of our damage because the stitch work died early. It's unfortunate, but like I said, it's not the end of the world. The timer's pretty forgiving here, so, you know, it happens. But yeah, we're just focusing Stitchflesh here. No real damage into the creation. That's not helping single target or cleave or whatever, right? I believe like Chain Lightning for extra Maelstrom, etc. But no extra stuff. I was too close there to that hook, and I don't break the fixate. That's another thing. If that happened, we probably would have pushed him maybe low enough with the hook as well. But you see here, we're just going to have to 3-phase it. A little unfortunate. Could have been avoided, but, you know, it's not the end of the world here. I'm going to finish off the boss, pick up the Stitchflesh, and not die, ideally. Yeah, boss is dead here, and we head up. So we still have, for this boss, 1 spear and 3 hammers, and we will use this on Fortified Week as well. 1 spear, 3 hammers, and Bloodlust. This guy is super spooky, so what we're going to do here is we're going to spear and lust on pull, because you got a good 30 seconds before the Dark Exile goes off, so everyone can burst here on pull. Big damage on him. And what we're saving the hammers for, and why we gave it to the healer, the tank, and the lowest single target DPS, is because what you want to use hammers for is to insta-break the Icebound Aegis to not have too much damage going out at those times. So the first Aegis, we don't worry about. It's the we have Bloodlust and the Spear going and all that kind of stuff, so we're not worried at all. And for other Aegises, we need to say, so do we have a cooldown for this? This one, no, I committed my hammer. The next one, do we have a cooldown for this? Currently, still no, the answer is. So we have the healer hammer, and that's a big reason why the tank and healer always have a hammer, is because they're always on the platform, so they can always use it no matter what. Right now our shaman has a hammer, right? He's down, so he can't use it. We're healer hammering this one because we don't have CDs, and we should have our shaman back soon. We probably should have had him just jump off the edge. I think it's a little rough down there for Ellie Shaman, especially because he blew all the CDs up here. So I think we probably should have sent him off the edge and just rest him. That's probably the best thing to do. But here we have this. We have rogue CDs going for this one, so we're not worried. It breaks fairly quickly. And I believe we're going to hammer the next set, and then we're going to have Storm Ellie for the shield after that. So we're good again. So this shield is the last one here where we don't have much for. And so this is going to be our last hammer here. Just sending it into insta-break. And then the next shield, we have CDs. We have the Warrior in Execute phase coming up. We'll have the Shaman in a ramped up Storm Ellie. So we're perfectly safe for this next Aegis here. And that's pretty much this boss, is just making sure you're timing those hammers and timing CDs to get you through those shields. But that just about wraps up this video on my walkthrough of a plus 21 Tyrannical Necrotic Wake on Season 2's Tormented Affix. I'll be doing videos just like this for all 8 dungeons. I have a couple out already on my channel, so be sure to subscribe if you're interested to be notified when those other ones get posted. Also, if you have any questions at all regarding the route that we used in this video, other Mythic Plus dungeons, maybe even just tanking in general, feel free to leave a comment down below, or you can come stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and I'll do my best to answer. That is all for now though. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.